Okay, the Board of Education meeting will now come to order at 7:02. I'd like to recognize Al Hitzke this evening as Secretary Pro Tem, as I'm serving as President Pro Tem this evening. Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Builder. Fingerhut.
Here.
Gallegos.
Here.
Hitzke here. Rose.
Here.
Holly.
Okay. So the first order of business for the evening is we have a vacancy of our board member, Lisa St. Clair, and we will need to, since she was vice president, we need to reorganize and nominate a new vice president. I would like to call for nominations. Nominations are now in order for the office of vice president. I will nominate Ray Rose as vice president. Are there any other nominations for the office of vice president? Hearing none. Are there any further nominations for the office of vice president? I will make a third call to see if there are any nominations for vice president.
I move we close the nominations.
Okay, a motion has been made to nominate Ray Rose to the office of vice president. The secretary pro tem will now call the roll for voting on the office of vice president. I will second the motion.
Okay. Who made the original?
I guess I did, so you will have to
I'll
second.
second.
Okay.
Okay, Fingerhut.
Aye.
Hitzke, aye. Rose.
Aye.
Billetier,
Not present.
Gallegos.
Aye.
So Ray,
Holly.
not present. So Ray Rose has received the majority of the votes cast and is elected vice president. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone present this evening? Now, the next on the item is citizen comments. Do we have anyone present this evening in person or online who wishes to address the board? No, Mike? I'll give everyone a little opportunity. If anyone wants to raise their hand or be chosen to speak now. Give another minute. If there is no one, then we will move on. We have a new item on our agenda this month, the Board of Education comments. Is there anyone on the board that wishes to address anything this evening and speak in public comment?
At this point.
Hearing none, we will move on to District 75 reports. We will start with the report of the business office.
I'll wait for the PowerPoint.
So before T does her presentation, I just wanted to make an observation for the benefit of the board. And one of the things that we talked about at one of the previous meetings was what was the role of the finance committee. So we discussed it at our last finance committee. and we had a special meeting. And I think it's important that the board's made aware of the fact that we called a special meeting and we discussed the budget for over 2 hours. And went through in great detail everything that you're gonna hear tonight. And I think is what's really significant about what came out of our discussions, Finance Committee, is if you look at the way that T has laid this out, this is the first time you're going to see the report in this format. And it is very detailed. It talks about all the revenues, all the expenditures, where the dollars come from, where they're going to be at the end, and it kind of lays out where we're headed and how we plan on doing that. So my hats off to T for a fantastic job. And I think if you haven't had the opportunity yet to read the detailed report, if you can before we have our next meeting regarding the budget, because I'm telling you, this is so much detail and it answers so many questions right out of the box. So
Well, he just did my job. Thank you, Ray, very much. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss with you our FY23 draft budget. We're starting off with this graph. This is something that you saw in our February presentation of the 5-year financial plan. And we're putting this as our first slide because this also applies to our budget development process as a whole. As many of you know, a lot of the things that we do in the finance department is commingled. So even though this was presented as the tool we use to identify how the 5-year financial plan is done, it's also used for our budget purpose. So if we take a look at number 1, the engagement process, this really begins, especially for like the FY23 budget, in May of the prior year. So for the FY23 budget, we're talking about May 2021, where the board elects a budget preparer. So coming up here in the next month, you will be electing the budget preparer for the FY24 budget, and that will start the FY24 budget process. But the budget process for FY23 began a year ago, and July and September are spent usually as part of this process, just developing that major general budget as a whole, looking at our current year, looking at our prior year trends, looking at where we're going to be in the future, as well as our current staff and where they may be moving in terms of lanes, insurance movement, those types of things. So that general budget development is done in July and September in that first section. If we go to section 2, which is the discovery part of the process, that happens in October and November. That's when we're meeting with the budget officers. We're doing our staffing. We're taking time to really go through, and you're going to hear a lot of this information later, but going through with those budget officers, their short-term and long-term goals, because as part of the financial plan and our current year budget, we need to know what those goals are so we can plan for those and plan appropriate resources to support those goals. If we go to section 3, that is the research analysis section. This happens usually between December and January, and I like to say this is when the magic happens, because sections 1 and 2 give us an idea of the resources we have as well as the resources we need. But the magic happens in 3 when we really put the rubber to the road and have to find creative ways to fund some of those goals that we have. And so that's a really fundamental part of the budget process. As we move to section 4, we just spoke about this part of the process, which is February and March. And this is when we do our 5-year financial plan that goes to the board, as well as the first draft of the budget that goes to the Finance Advisory Committee. And to Mr. Rose's point, we did a deep dive in our budget, and we included that document for the board's information, just for you to be able to see what we did as a finance committee, realizing that the finance committee is designed to go really deep into the numbers and into those footnotes, whereas our board meetings, we generally stay at that 30,000 foot level. So if we go to section number 5, This is the adoption process. This is that section that we're in currently. And that happens between April and June where you actually adopt your budget. The budget, we like to have adopted by June 30th of the year, but the law requires us to actually have it adopted by September, which means that you're 3 months into your fiscal year before you're even required to have your budget adopted. But we like to have ours done by the beginning of the fiscal year because that makes more prudent sense. And then section 6, that's going to be our actual FY23 fiscal year. That's going to happen July to June 2023. And that's going to be where we're actually looking at this budget and seeing how it is trending towards actuals. If we look at our total timeline for our FY23 budget, we've gotten us to where we are currently. What's going to happen in May is that the board is going to be presented with a resolution and asked to put the budget on display. In June, we will hopefully adopt the budget. And then finally, we will file that in July, well ahead of the due date in September. If we go to the next slide, this slide is more at that 30,000 foot level that we generally review at board meetings. So what we've done here is we have our two graphs. We have expenditures on the right and our revenue on the left. I'm going to start with salaries and benefits, and we're going to go all the way around the circle. Salaries and benefits are estimated to be up 9% from prior year. This includes staffing as well as estimated contract provisions. It also includes our estimated rates for insurance increases that take effect in September. If we take a look at the next line, that's our food, custodial, and transportation services. We are trending about $100,000 up from prior year, and that is mainly because of our transportation agreement being increased by 7%. If we take a look at shared services, there is a minimal increase, nothing significant or major. If we go up to purchase services, we're looking at an actual drop in purchase services expenditures from prior year of $146,000. This is mainly due to IDEA grant funds that were spent on professional development. We have not determined the IDEA grant for next year yet. Once that is done, those expenses and associated revenues will be adjusted. If we go to our utilities are not estimated to increase significantly in the coming year, with the exception of fuel for our buses. If we take a look at our supplies and other items, those are going up $149,000. This is mainly due to grant amendments, technology refreshments, including fourth grade purchases of student devices. If we take a look at our capital improvements, they are actually estimated to go down $200,000 next year. This is mainly because of a one-time purchase that was in a grant that is not going to be funded for the coming year. Finally, we get to out-of-district tuition, or not finally, but second to last, we get to out-of-district tuition, which we are not estimating either a significant increase nor a decrease. Finally, we take a look at COVID expenses, and they are estimated to increase $200,000, but that really depends on the timing of when we spend our ESSER 2 and 3 funds. If you take a look on the other graph, you'll see COVID funds, those expenditures and revenues match to the penny, so that if we spend more, we'll also take in more revenue, and vice versa. If we spend less, we will take in less revenue, so it'll have a net impact on our fund balance of 0. So now looking at our draft budgeted revenue, we take a look at our levy, again, starting over here with the largest part of our graph, and we'll work our way around the circle. CPI for next year is 1.4%, and we're estimating our levy to increase by roughly 1%. CPPRT, where we are neither estimating an increase nor a decrease for our corporate property taxes. If we take a look at other local revenue, we're estimating that it will go down roughly $70,000. This is due to two things. One is our food service program. Having that food service program now return to where lunches and breakfasts are required to be paid to receive those meals, we will see a drop in participation in the coming year. So we've estimated not only a drop in expenditures, but also a drop in revenue to account for that. These next three items on our chart, which would be other state, EBF, and MCATs, that is our state funding. Our state funding, for the most part, we are estimating to remain flat for the coming year, with the exception of what we call our MCATs. MCATs are reimbursements for very large expenditures that we have. Personnel expenditures for special education is one. Another is our transportation reimbursement. You may recall we had a year where we pretty much did not transport students. What that did was create a year in which we will have a decrease in funding from state because the state is reimbursing us for expenditures that we have spent. So a year of lower expenditures means a future year of lower revenues, unfortunately. Other federal, we are estimating that will go up $190,000 at this point. We're estimating that based on grants and Medicaid increases for the coming year. And finally, again, we have those COVID funds that support our COVID expenses, increasing by $200,000, again, depending on the timing. We will see how our actual spending and receipts end up trending for the coming year. I like to joke that the budget is the art of explaining tomorrow why the predictions I made yesterday didn't happen today. So realize that our budget is a fluid document. When we come to the board in the May meeting, there will likely be changes, and those changes will be brought to the board with obviously highlights of any major significant changes that happen as a result of information. But with that, that is the end of our draft budget report, and I'm here to entertain any questions you may have. Well, thank you very much, and we will revisit this next month. Thank you.
We will now hear the report of the Human Resources Department.
Periodically throughout the year, HR will take a look at job descriptions, either when we have a new opportunity for a vacancy to make sure that we can make any adjustments to the qualifications or duties as we feel are appropriate, or to adjust a job description for a staff that's in a current role who's had to have a change in those responsibilities to make sure that they're accurate. So tonight, I have 7 job descriptions that I'm sharing for your review. 5 are revisions to the qualifications. All of these jobs are seeing edits to the qualifications regarding the need to be fluent in both English and Spanish and requiring special reading endorsements. And then the last 2 are brand new job descriptions. I didn't highlight everything on the page because the entire document would glow. But those are new job descriptions that will report to Dr. Cacciatore and will guide our summer school programs, and that's the summer school leader and the summer school site supervisor.
Just to clarify, Shane, those summer positions that were new, board already approved those?
They approved the position, just not the job description. Yes, thank you.
Foresee any problem filling these?
You don't anticipate. The goal is to, well, for the external, I mean, for these elementary teacher bilingual positions, we will have to do a greater degree of targeted recruitment, and we have started that process long before these changes were made. But for the summer school positions, we're hoping to identify internal candidates for those roles.
So just out of curiosity, these positions are already in place.
Except for the summer school, the 5 that have the revisions,
The
yes.
5.
Mhm.
So is this then just an update of the job description where it's included expectations of educator license and being able to speak Spanish and English?
That's correct.
So that's already been in practice. It's just an update of the job description.
Correct. Some of our job descriptions just needed some retooling to better articulate expectations. Ready, anything? All righty. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear the report of teaching and learning. We'll have 2 summer school leader positions that are filled. That's your report. Great.
I just thought I'd let you know that we had 2 internal candidates. They're both qualified.
One of the things I wanted to start off before Sarah kicked it off was just one of the things that we've heard over the past few months from the board is wanting to be able to see like the path that the district's been going in the different major curricular areas that we've had in place. And it's been running in the background. And what we heard was you want to see it up front. So Sarah meeting with the teaching and learning team, and then you'll hear from Dan with technology. You should see the format of what we're doing over the next 3 to 5 years. And as a board, be able to keep these sheets somewhere so you have them. Print them off. Don't keep them in the Google file because we typically don't go back to our Google files. Put it somewhere where you've got it readily available. So you can always refer back to this because this will be the guide. It's a working document. So as Sarah and her team and Ryan and Jamie all do stuff, is working for like the SEL stuff, things will change. So they might get modified a little bit, but we'll be bringing those back so you know. So that's what we look forward for you to be able to hear tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I've got co-pilots with me tonight, so we're gonna all speak briefly about the curriculum cycle, but to start us off, our curriculum review process is actually quite similar to T's business model process in that there's an evaluation, there's gating feedback from other stakeholders, there's analyzing what we have and the data, and all of those things, the same way we do with money, we do with curriculum in terms of our instructional practices and the resources we have available for our students and for our teachers to have access to. So I just have less stages, but we do more work within the stages. In the beginning, that's when we are very similar to what you experienced last year with the reading rollout, where there was a lot of initial work, a lot of research, a lot of meeting with teams, deciding where we need to go, look at our student data, how are we moving forward with our practices and our materials. Stage 2 is really what we're experiencing this year with our reading initiative, but it really applies to any content area, and that you try it out, you experiment with it, you make adjustments as you go, you see what's working, what additional resources you need, or what shifts you need to make in terms of your practice. And then you enter phase 3, which is really the monitoring and evaluating and adjusting, because every year your student population is different. And so what worked last year might not work the same way this year. And so we're always just kind of tweaking the materials and adjusting, but there isn't that huge shift of overhaul in terms of transition the way you see in those earlier stages. So I know that I have given you a lot of different content areas, and each one of those has their own journey and path throughout that cycle. But as an example, I thought I would use reading, since that's the one that we've been speaking about the most this year in terms of the familiarity with the process. And so this year, we formally rolled out a new instructional model with the workshop format, small group instruction, guided reading, looking at our student data to drive our decisions, trying to pick books that are specific to their instructional level, being really specific in the details, and having a lot of discussions at the team level in terms of what books are working, what books do we still need, where do we need to go with this, so that next year we're moving more strongly and confidently in implementing what we implemented for the first time this year with more fidelity, so it just gets tighter as we go. And then as we move into next year, moving into that more confident level of instruction, we can focus on more of the assessment practices, how we're assessing our students. Are they learning and demonstrating what we anticipated them learning to being able to demonstrate? Or do we need to shift the questions we're asking or the performance tasks we're asking of them to make sure that there's alignment between the instructional standard, what our instruction practices look like in the classroom, and then what those student outcomes are, because it should all be tied together. And then we'll just continue to implement those reading resources. And it should, by 23-24, we should really be humming in this area, which will allow us to really pay more close attention to some of the other content areas. Next year, we also have to look at writing. The year after that, we have science and social studies and math. And so over the course of a 5 or 6 year cycle, we'll have been able to evaluate our instructional models for all of those different content areas. We can also use this framework to support our committee work. And so, Mr. Zach, I'm gonna have you take over here for a
Great,
second
thanks.
and talk about dual language.
Wonderful, thank you, Sarah.
Last year, the Linguistic Task Force was charged to evaluate the dual language program in order to make major program recommendations and shifts. This year, included in those recommendations was identifying as a dual language district, hiring a bilingual director and building capacity in the organization to support really living and being a dual language district. This year, we have this year in our year one of the dual language steering committee, what we're really doing is taking those recommendations and building a committee of certified staff, teachers, non-teacher certified staff, building admin, district admin to steer the ship of those recommendations. So in year one, we have reviewed, refined, and finalized mission, vision, and we believe statements that are all now public on the website in English and Spanish. We have begun the process of gathering evidence to evaluate where we are on the spectrum of best practices in dual language education as informed by the guiding principles of education, which is from the Center of Applied Linguistics, is called CAL. Next year, we will continue that process of gathering evidence to align where we are at in terms of best practices with dual language in order to develop specific SMART goals related to curriculum, instruction, assessment, family engagement that will guide the work that we do. You will notice in year 3 to 5, it is really monitoring, refining and adjusting the goals based on what we're doing very well as what we need to improve on. And so in our dual language steering committee, we're really trying to just facilitate best understanding and best practices and develop and monitor program improvement as first recommended by the Linguistic Task Force. Thank you. And I have now Jamie DiCarlo, who will speak about her section.
So I'll share a bit about our social emotional learning initiatives that we have in the district. As you know, when we talked about our restorative restart coming back into school within the pandemic and just the impact that this has had socially, emotionally on our students and our families and lots of different types of hardships of all sorts. And so some of the pieces that we have been working on include currently, we have implementation of Tier 1 with Fidelity. That's second step. We've had that for since I've been here, which is a great resource, a Tier 1 initiative in all of our buildings, as well as the zones of regulations implemented with Fidelity in our K2 building. We're adopting that for our preschool building more comprehensively across all the classrooms as well for next year. And then a new initiative this year, which I was really excited about, was to start parent nights. So we had one in the fall through Zoom, and then we've had 3 recently. We kind of stacked the last month of multiple opportunities, of kind of envisioning more of like a cohort opportunity. And we have seen an increase from the first parent night to the third of these spring parent nights, where we had an increase ×4 of the amount of families. So we had 10 parents at our most recent one. So we want to see, you know, again, I want to actively work, as you'll see throughout these pieces, we want to actively work with families to really get their feedback on what topics they'd be interested in and how to, again, have that home school connection. We continue to have training for our staff in the area of SEL. One example this fall, as you all know, we had Dr. Doug Bolton present at each staff meeting. He and his colleague are doing coaching and consulting work at Washington currently. And so we will continue that, whether it's with him or on a different scale, the professional development through the 5 years. We also want to tool up next year and do an assessment of our interventions to make sure we have the right resources for our student demographic. And so then any new implementations could come in the year 3. So these are just some of the pieces. Crisis prevention intervention is a training model that we utilize in our school system, and that will continue as well. So just really that continuation. When we look at years 3, 4, and 5, we see continuing the parent education opportunities, providing the professional development to staff, and the crisis prevention intervention de-escalation training as well. And that's it for my slides. Are there any questions for us holistically? We're all still up here, so we can answer any questions for you post this slide.
I think the advantage of this is that everyone knows where we're headed and what we're working at. And so even though, as Dr. Myers mentioned, we might have to adjust it along the way, I think it helps T with her budgeting. I think it helps their teachers with the planning. It helps the administrative team with their PD. That we're all just trying to be super transparent about this is what we're really focusing on now, but know that the other areas are coming.
And so where does new curriculum, when it is looked for, fit into that? Would that be at the beginning or end stages, that's when we would expect, like the math, I know the math curriculum we did
Yes.
in the last couple of years, and that's being implemented now. I know, looking at the sheet.
Mhm.
And my understanding with this, it helps codify it so that we can all be aware of it, even if we haven't been at board meetings 2 or 3 years ago, to see that it's all in a cycle, such that we don't buy all new reading, all new math, all new science, all in the same year.
Correct.
Because that would be not fiscally responsible, nor would it be helpful for staff and training and.
Right, yes. It's also emotionally
Right.
irresponsible.
Yeah, overwhelming. We don't need to overwhelm all this.
Staff,
Catastrophic
training, yeah,
for everyone involved.
right.
Right, yes. Mhm.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Of course.
Mine's more of a comment than a question, but I think one of the things that when I was reading through the information that I found, I guess, encouraging is, as we are almost done with our equity policy, one of the things that the committee really wanted to see and share is make sure that we look at everything in the district with an equity lens, which I think we've always done a really good job of since the time I've been here. I can only speak for the time I've been here, but in looking at this, these first 3, slides that you guys went over, I think that vision fits this, from the parent nights to being a dual language district, like Ryan mentioned. I just wanted to give kudos for that. I just think it represents our community, and I think it makes them feel all welcome and as part of the team. So that's all. I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Freddie.
Thank you.
Ready?
Thank you very much. Okay, next, we will hear from the technology.
Good evening. It's now been 7 years that District 120 and District 75 have entered into a shared services agreement with the goal of improving technology at both districts. I promise I won't read this entire slide, but on the slide, I have listed some of our latest accomplishments for the past year. These are by no means all of our accomplishments, just some of the more recent ones that we're proud of. One of the biggest accomplishments being the combining of District 75 and District 120's network. So now all District 75 buildings come through Underline High School, and this allowed us to increase the broadband at every District 75 school from 100 meg to 1,000 meg, and at the high school from 500 meg to 10,000 meg. Now, this is a key project that will allow us to go forward with our 3-year plan. To come up with this plan, we have worked with several stakeholders, including staff, community members, municipalities like the Mundelein Police Department, vendors, and our insurance company. And one of the biggest concerns that kept coming up is security. Schools are being hit with ransomware, malware. And because of this, insurance companies are having to pay out, which resulted in the insurance companies wanting to ensure that we have a robust security plan and that we meet their criteria. One of those criteria is implementing multi-factor authentication, which is where you go to sign in and you have to have like a text to your phone or something with key fob or something like that to allow you to log in securely. And then nobody can steal your identity. So as you will see, our major focus is on improving data security, physical security, while also improving network performance at both districts. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have worked with stakeholders to determine the areas of concerns. In addition to this, we have identified what hardware is coming up to end of life or end of support. So when you purchase hardware, it doesn't last forever, right? The vendor will say, okay, this is the date, the end of life or end of support, where we will no longer get support. We need support in case something crashes or goes down. you know, you need that sport to get yourself back up and running. Also, we need to make sure that our planning included our insurance company's requirements, and we have been working with vendors, consultants, demoing what's out there, what best meets our needs, and then we came up with the following plan for implementation. Next slide, please. All right, so this summer, we are planning on migrating the District 75 staff from Gmail to Microsoft Exchange Online. Moving to this cloud-based platform will provide District 75 with more powerful tools to combat phishing and spam and be more secure. It'll also give the staff ability to receive voicemails to their email. And when we combine with District 120, emailing, calendar invites, stuff like that, will all be seamless between staff members at both districts. We're also going to be migrating our Active Directory, something called Microsoft Azure Cloud, which will also allow us to deploy higher level of protections on the staff devices. And that is what we need to implement that multi-factor authentication I talked about. And we're also looking at adding that multi-factor authentication for PowerSchool and Google accounts. And this summer, we are planning on moving our students to a new domain called mundelein.schools.org. And what this will do, this will allow students that enter into District 75 to keep their Google accounts until they graduate Mundelein High School. Whereas right now, when they move from district to district, they lose it all. So now they'll be able to keep their data. We're also looking at implementing some type of staff awareness training for teaching staff how to avoid phishing emails, malware, hopefully viruses. And as for physical security, we will be replacing the old analog clocks that are in the classrooms and hallways with new digital IP speakers and clocks under a safety grant that District 75 has acquired. This will also mean that we can implement what's called an emergency broadcast system. So we could have, like in the case of an emergency, we can have those clocks flashing. We can have a message scrolling on the screen. And this also means that when we integrate with Mundelein High School, we'd be able to create zones. So we could either send this alert out to both districts at the same time, or just one school, or a couple schools, or however we want to configure that. Upgrading this PA system means that the teachers will lose that ability to hit the button to call the front office. However, under our safety grant, we are adding phones in every classroom at District 75 schools. And this will also come with the added benefit of easier communication for staff or teachers to contact parents if they all have a phone in their classroom. Before that can happen, we are planning on migrating to a cloud-based voice over IP phone system, and then eventually merging both districts together on the same phone-based system so that calls can be routed and transferred between the two districts seamlessly like they're in the same building. Another project we're planning is to move the District 75 surveillance cameras in the 4 schools to a cloud-based camera system. This will allow us to have one point of access via the internet. It'll also give us the opportunity to acquire better quality cameras and some pretty cool new features that our current camera servers cannot do. So help us get into the 21st century. And then eventually we'll be looking at also combining the camera servers between the two districts as well. That way, us as well as the Mundelein Police Department will only have one point of entry via the internet where they can access cameras at any of the 7 buildings between the two districts. Also under a safety grant, we'll be moving District 75's key fob system to a cloud-based system that will provide greater security, administration, and all over the internet as well. And it also gives staff the ability to use their Bluetooth device like a cell phone or Apple Watch or whatever to get into the building. Again, eventually we'll merge it with District 75's. At that time, then staff that are shared services or go between buildings will be able to use the same device at any of the buildings. And then under E-rate reimbursement, we're planning on upgrading our firewalls and several switches throughout the buildings for better performance, latest security enhancements and redundancy, et cetera. And lastly, we're currently planning and testing for district-wide migration of Windows 11 next year. Next slide, please. And then as you can see, things look very similar at District 120. Some things District 120 is ahead of District 75, such as installing IP speakers and clocks, but there are other things District 75 would be ahead of District 120 on, like the phone system and phones. But we are hoping that by the end of the 3 years, both districts will be sharing the same platforms, resources, which should result in better security management and easier usage for staff members. Next slide, please. These are the visual outcomes. I've already gone over them as I went over the previous slides on our implementation plan, but it's pretty. Next slide, please. And as always, technology changes very quickly. So we will continue to monitor our technology and bandwidth usage, make adjustments as necessary. A lot of the items I went over are dependent on one another. So also everything that we do is in-house. So we do everything that I mentioned with our highly trained IT staff. We know that this is an aggressive plan and we may need to tweak schedule here or there. But again, we hope to have both districts technology peer by the end of the 3 years. Any questions?
Just a couple. When you said the key fob system is going to be replaced, I know currently, I think the police and the fire department also have fobs to get access. Will they also have, do they have a designated device to use as access, or how is that?
We will still have the ability to issue fobs.
Okay.
So we'll still have
It
the
just will be the same.
fobs. Correct, but it just comes with many more bells and whistles, plus the system that we have at District 75 today. When I talked to the vendor that had implemented it, there's no room for growth. It's maxed out and it's kind of antiquated, so.
And then when you mentioned the mundeleynschools.org, so that will be, you said this summer?
Correct.
They're all, now, will that just be, that'll be for everybody, both districts?
It's only for students.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's just students in both districts,
Okay.
correct?
And so that all of their current information will be migrated over to their new,
Yes.
so that they'll have that.
Correct.
Does that apply for the
That's what I'm-
existing high
that's-
schoolers?
You know what, I might have misspoke. We're not sure if we're gonna be able to get that data over or not. We're gonna try. That's all I can, we're looking into different ways that we may be able to do it, but I'm not exactly sure if we'll be able to keep their data or not. But we will have, like, they'll still be able to sign into their old if they have to get their data.
Okay,
So one way or another, the data will be there.
so they'll be able to sign
It's
into
just
their
that we're
Google
not-
accounts. you mean?
Correct.
Okay.
We're just not sure if we could transfer them over.
Okay,
So-
but they won't lose their access.
They won't
to
lose
the stuff that
anything,
they-
correct, correct. And we'll give them time.
Sure. And the clocks, so does that mean there will be no more analog clocks for kids to learn how to read time?
Well, we could put some dummy clocks in there, so. Right? Yeah.
Maybe,
The clocks, the clocks aren't built into the speakers. So if they wanted to, they could keep the analog clock and the digital clock. But the PA system is what would be going away. But it's a very old antiquated PA system as well. It just uses speaker wire, whereas the IP speakers clocks are on our network. And we can control them like volume settings and stuff like that over the network.
And so we don't have to, you're saying that the teachers who maybe do use the clocks right now to teach lessons or whatever, they won't be removed necessarily? They'll
Oh,
just
yeah,
be basically phased out.
I guess I can't really answer that. That'd be more of a maintenance thing.
Sure.
Because some of those areas, they may want to remove the clock to put the digital clock in that spot. But as far as tech goes, it's the analog clocks are not tech, so.
Now, what happens if the internet goes out and the network goes down?
Well, pretty much everything right now is relying on the internet anyways. Like our business office totally runs on, on the internet. So if the internet does go down, we're, the one-to-one goes down and a lot of our systems go down. What we have done when we merged networks is we moved away from District 75, away from Comcast's network to what's called ICN, Illinois Century Network, which is a government ran network. And I can tell you from my experience, in 13 years at the high school, we've only had, I want to say two outages with ICN, whereas District 75 experienced about 3 a year. So by moving them to a more reliable network is going to help that. And then again, when we did have outages, they didn't last very long. So, but yeah, everything's reliant on the internet nowadays.
Right.
And Christy, and like our manipulatives for math and stuff, there's these things called the Judy clock. They're like these little cardboard clocks that are, I know, I've seen them in their special education rooms and I know we have them available. So the kids actually manipulate like the visual old fashioned. So they'll still get to learn, even if it's not on the wall.
I'm just curious. No, it's fine. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from the superintendent's office.
First one that we have, gonna be a lot of the board discussion. So the first part of the discussion for the members of the board this evening, what we really need to be able to do this tonight is establish the time frame in which you want to be able to fill the vacated seat. So tonight, a couple things will happen. A, board's accepting the resignation from the board member. 2, establishing the timeline for yourselves with when you want to be able to fill that role, which it has to be done within 60 days, which we have a timeline to go through. And I think more importantly right now for you is talking about the process. What's the interview process look like for you? Meaning getting the posting up, who's receiving the applications, is the whole board going to review all the applications, then setting up an interview schedule, and then be able to have time for the board to come back and discuss who they'd want to select, and then making the offer and then the announcement. So first and foremost, the board does have 2 options. You have the option of either appointing someone to be to the board, or you have the option of going through an interview process. The last time the board went through this, they chose to go through an interview process. So I think that's step 1. And that's for the board to decide you want an interview or you want to appoint.
I personally think we should do an interview. I think it gives us a better perspective of a wider group of people who are interested. And it gives us a better ability to look at who is interested. And I think it gives us a better ability to as well get feedback as we're interacting with folks who are going through the process.
I agree. I prefer to do the process like we did with the last vacancy and at least put out a call for applications so that we can see how many interested candidates we have. And then we can make a decision from there if, but my preference would be that we'd offer everybody an interview. Unless the number is too large and maybe if it's not, if it's prohibitive, then we can discuss, reviewing that and then interviewing the next level of candidate, we can narrow down the field and do it that way. But I think last time we were able to interview all of the candidates who had put in an application and moved on with that. And if I recall correctly, because man, it's been 2 years. I think we did smaller groups, so it wasn't the entire board doing the interview. So even if there were a number of candidates, we could sort of sign up for shifts and doing it that way. And there's the option of, doing them in person or on remote access, depending on schedules and stuff. So, I would prefer to do it that way in order to
Yeah, I
have
think
flexibility.
in today's society, you run the risk if you appoint somebody, somebody going, well, they just picked who they wanted.
Right.
Rather than having that option to look and see who it is, who you might like. And see if there's somebody that has a diverse opinion that still would fit it well.
Freddie?
I agree. I think the process that I went through was very fair. Obviously, I can only speak for my interview, but yeah, I thought it was very beneficial to get most of the board members on one screen or, in one meeting. Obviously, at the time it was through Google Meets. But yeah, I 100% agree. We should do the interview process.
I think if there's only a few candidates, then we could do it as a board. If it becomes like 6 or 7, then maybe we might want to break it down a little bit as to, and then compare notes.
And just to clarify, since I read the policy a few times and prep for that too, the 60-day date starts from tonight when we formally accept. So I believe the last time we had called, because we can all as a board meet to do it. We just have to call a meeting and then go into executive session in order to conduct interviews. And we can do that. So that could be done because our next board meeting is not until May 17th. And then our board meeting after that, we're going to have to either move our board meeting to accommodate or hold a special board meeting in order to do so, because we hit just the week before, the 60 days runs the week before our June board meeting that's previously scheduled. So my preference would be to have us be able to start, deciding the timeline of how long we want to keep the application pool open and start getting going on those applications so that at the next board meeting, I think hopefully we'll be in a good position to make hopefully some decisions so that we can move forward on that, whether that's, if we can get the interview scheduled, before then to have some discussion on that. And then, decide whether we're going to go ahead and proceed at the May 17th board meeting, if we can get that. It feels like it's quick, but I don't know, we'll see, I guess, how many we get, because that decision. And then, I'm not opposed personally to, especially now that some of the other committees are wrapping up, since I'm already used to meeting, but we can certainly, I'm open to a special meeting if need be in order to address this issue, or if we needed to do that does not bother me, especially since I think there's a few other things that could be accomplished that may need a special meeting anyway. So I'm okay with that option.
So maybe first things to look at, then let's go through the timeline part. So right now we've got this board meeting, we'll accept it. How long do you want to have the posting open for people to submit applications?
How long did you have it open for when Freddie came out?
Usually it's around 2 weeks. So I give people, I think the range you'd want to go is maybe 3 to be the longest. But usually word kind of gets out anyway, so I think 2 weeks is
I think
reasonable.
The April 30th is a Saturday. That seems like a nice round time, which I mean, we could really go until May 1st, being that that's a Sunday, and, then we'd be ready to review whatever has come in at that point and then decide. So it's just under 2 weeks, but I think provides a natural break with the end of the month or the beginning of the next.
Well, I think it also forces people, if they are interested.
Let us know.
Apply.
Just because otherwise, I would like to give the opportunity, because it may take a little time to schedule some of the interviews and stuff, and I hate for that part to be rushed, so I'd rather have the application part due. So how does everyone feel about saying, have them get in by May 1st, that those can be disseminated to us and we can start planning the interviews?
First is a Sunday.
So they close at the end of, so we just change the.
They could be emailed, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, yes, they would have to be delivered in person, I guess, by Friday at 5 or whatever time
Right.
the office closes. But they could, if there's an email, I guess it can still be submitted over the weekend in that regard. That's just why I had said, just because May 1st sounds like a nice.
Turn them on. And out of the postings ready to go for the paper and everything. So we'll be able to fill that in, and then that'll go out tomorrow. But when does it go in the paper?
Next Monday. By next
So-
Monday. Next Monday and Wednesday.
So that would give the applicants a week.
Do we also have the ability to put, newspaper's not the only way we can get out the word. Do we have the ability to, put it on our website? And I don't know if
Should be
there's
able to, yeah.
a plan for a email to go out to, call for them, or do we not do that? I don't know what the protocol usually is.
We can. Yeah, it's however we want to be able to think we can get the information out, we certainly can.
I mean, I know
So
that so
for-
many of the communications in the district are already done that way,
Mhm.
plus social media and stuff, just to get that out, and then we can see how many we end up with.
Peter is shaking his head yes.
Yeah, we can do all of it. If you really want to spread the word, website, social media, last email, all three of those things work pretty well. I think that would cover basically our audience.
And then the newspaper being sort of a backup, I don't think that that should be the primary.
It's a legality.
Yeah, no, I'm certainly not suggesting we don't do it. I'm just saying, I don't know that we need to adjust the timeline for the paper alone, only because I don't think that that's the method of primary communication these days, but
As long as we can show we've done all the other
sure.
pieces to it.
Is everyone comfortable with that timeframe?
Mhm.
That makes those present.
So we're saying a week. Essentially,
10 days.
we're gonna get
It's
emails,
about
we're
10
gonna get the
days.
immediate group that we have access to,
It's 10 days,
right?
today being the 19th, so
So, okay. So close the business on the first. All right, if we say we have all the applications turned in on the first, board members, pull out your phones and look at your calendars. When would you want to get together to go through and screen the applicants? So it'd be starting sometime that week of May 1st, which Monday is the 2nd. So it could be as early as Monday, May 2nd. While you're looking, we need a follow-up meeting date that you could interview the candidates.
so we're looking at a meeting date, like for an evening.
To review applicants,
Okay,
and then you would select who you want to interview, and you need another meeting. We need 2 dates from you.
On the first week, I'm available on Monday the 2nd and Thursday the 5th. Following week, I'm available all.
I could do the 2nd. Tuesdays are hard, so third is kind of tough, but yeah, I agree, I could do the 2nd or the 5th. Maybe it makes sense to try to do the 2nd, since that's right after we end the deadline, and then meet, go over them, and then schedule interviews.
The 2nd is better for me than the 5th.
That work?
Monday the 2nd. Freddie, do you know if you're available?
Yeah, the 2nd or the 3rd work for me.
I think you're muted. We lost your volume.
Can you hear me?
I think we lost, we don't have your volume.
The 2nd or the 3rd?
Oh,
Got it.
May 2nd.
Yep.
Both good. All right, so May 2nd, board members will meet to screen the applicants. So the meeting time will be after 4. So what time? 6?
I can do any, I can be flexible that day, so. I mean, definitely after 5. for me,
After
but
5. So why don't we shoot for 6 right now? 6 o'clock, Freddie? Okay.
Yep.
So May 2nd at 6 o'clock. Then look at a day of file, maybe later in that week if you wanted, but I'd probably suggest the following week to do the interviews.
I'm available all week that following week.
Well, 2 committee meetings I don't no longer need to attend on the 9th, so. The 9th is good for me.
Ninth, okay.
I show there's an equity committee meeting that day.
Yes, but we don't anticipate needing it because we will give that report in a little while.
I'll take it out. All right.
And right now, Anna and I would have 2 pending events on the Tuesday and the Wednesday, the 10th and 11th.
How does the 9th work?
We're looking at the 9th for interview day. Thumbs up,
I mean,
6 o'clock.
That works.
Okay. And then if that's the cadence the board can work with and get the applicant everybody wants, then we would use the May 17th day.
Right.
Board meeting to announce and bring the new board member on,
I like that plan.
okay?
That allows us to do it before the end of the school year, which I think is nice rather than,
Mhm.
not that it needs to be, but
Okay. Very good. So in your packet then, so I'll send out invites to everybody with the times, so with your calendar, so you have them. But just making sure, so tonight formally accepting the resignation. We're gonna open up the applications, the notice tomorrow. We'll use also our own media outlets. May 2nd, in the business, all applications are due. May 2nd, board is meeting at 6 o'clock at night. Right now, we're posting that as a regular meeting. It'll start off going into open session and then you'll go into closed immediately, so then you can review the applications. During that meeting, you'll review the applicants and determine who you want to come back for interviews. The interview date is May 9th at 6 o'clock. So you'll need to coordinate the times with when you're having those individuals come in. So you need to work with Anna or myself when you're doing this on the 9th, so we make sure we've got it coordinated for how we're accepting potential candidates through the interview process, meaning getting into the building, making the switch, having copies and everything for everybody. So there's some coordination on our part. And then the plan would be to offer that position and then have them ready to be seated at the May 17th meeting.
I just want to make sure that what's up on the screen, what we had before, we're emailing, or the potential candidates are emailing the resumes to Kevin Howley, or is it changing?
I guess, and since he's not here, I hesitate to approve that on his behalf without checking with him. As board president, I don't have, that makes sense to have them go to him, but I guess we need to check with him to make sure he wants and can, over this time frame that he didn't have any input tonight in selecting, that he can accept those, because I don't know his own work
Yeah.
schedule. So maybe I would say Kevin Hawley, or if Kevin doesn't want to, I'm okay with it being, if we can designate Anna, or if you want to, do we designate another member of the board? I'm open to any of the suggestions. I don't know.
I think if they don't go to Kevin, sending them to Anna would be okay. So
If Anna wants to take on that, if she doesn't want to deal with that, that's okay. We
Right.
can have another board member do it. I don't mean to put that on her.
I could do it. No, it's not a problem. The
Alright.
mail ones, the one we receive in applications, the physical ones, we accept them here in the building, we'll manage those pieces, and then what, do you want me to forward them on, or you want me to collect them? Just information, how do you want me to get that information to you? How would you like
So is it possible for us to have like a shared file that all the board can have access to, they can all go into, regardless of who gets them?
Yes.
I mean, I think it would be nice to be able to look them over before we meet.
Mhm.
Right, that's what I'm saying, if they go into a shared file that Anna can share with us, and that's the only reason I was, while we could easily say Ray, if Kevin doesn't want to do it, my only thought was, if we have Anna do it, she can more easily scan them and get them in there, because otherwise it would be one of us forwarding them to her anyway, so we,
So we're not sitting here for an hour all reading.
Yeah.
Right.
And then going, oh, okay.
Okay,
Yes, I can do that.
so we'll go ahead and just put email on Ortiz.
okay,
We'll get the Google file set up, and then that way you'll have access to whenever they're submitted. You can go in that file whenever you have time.
That's a good point. I actually won't be here in Brisbane until May 2nd. So the process of
Okay.
collecting that data might be a little difficult where I'm located.
All right, if you get the folder set up, you can have them email it to me if you want. Yeah, you can do it.
or would you prefer one of the board members takes it on and then forwards them to you, so you don't have to be fielding them? I mean, I'm not looking to add to either of your plates, and
We're getting one.
if you're gone, that's certainly not to your plate.
What about you, Dana?
Sure, I could do that.
I'll show her the process.
Okay, because I do, whatever's gonna be, most efficient for the staff, that's what I would prefer rather than having multiple levels.
The
So
only thing that
however-
hesitate for me is with the volume of emails I get.
Yeah.
My finger goes fast on delete sometimes, and I would hate to have that happen.
Well, and that's why
So,
I don't know that
Diane is
that's
willing to do
a
that.
best use of your shirt.
I'll switch up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good points.
Not that, not that it will most likely happen, but in probability, possibility, not probability, we don't get any applications.
I think we already have some, so I don't think that's a problem.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
there's no fear of a shutout.
I'm fine with that. I just thought I'd raise that
If
question.
we got to that point, then I think then we have no choice but to appoint somebody,
Exactly.
but I don't know that that's an issue.
Okay. Just thought I'd raise the point.
Thank you. No, that's, I think we've already had people express interest and now they will follow the process and get us an application.
Happy to hear that.
The other parts in your board packet, I'd like you to go through, and all the documents in there are information that was developed and used during the last filling of the vacant seat. And in there were some considerations, like as board members, thinking about the different types of characteristics that you're looking for with the next board member coming on. Thinking of the strengths that each of the current board members bring to the table for the board. Where is there an area of expertise the board might want to bring on? Is there somebody maybe in finance that you'd be looking for? Like that might be a strength. Is there somebody looking at that has an equity viewpoint or works in an equity type profession? Is it more with maybe buildings and grounds piece? So think of the different things that you could imagine that would maybe even strengthen our board even more. Consider those characteristics. Other things that you had listed before were different preferences to consider. And whether or not, do they have children in the school district? Will they have children in the school district? Or did they have children in the district? Just getting those different perspectives. So you're really trying to formulate for you as an individual and then working as a group of 6 to come to some common areas of consensus of, yes, this is the type of characteristics we're looking for in our next board member. Because you've been talking a lot about how you work together as a team and what the priorities are for you as a board. So I think also the next thing is you need to be able to discuss, where do you see the priorities for you as a board? And you've got to be on the same page with that, because when you're interviewing the candidates, you're looking for somebody, like if you're going in the same direction, you guys show up, you want somebody that's in line with your thinking of the direction you want to go with the district? Or maybe you're thinking you need somebody that kind of plays that 10th person, helps challenge things a little bit. Those are discussions that you got to have. I'd encourage you to have before going into the interview process, so that you're all on the same page.
And that's a discussion that I would suggest takes place when we have the meeting on May 2nd. So hopefully all of the other board members are able to be present, because I think it's hard to have with 2 missing today, because their voices are important as well. So I think hopefully they're both available on that date too, so that we can all then discuss some of these things when we are reviewing the applications that we get. But that doesn't mean we can't think of some of those things, and if you know of anybody, invite to apply, and then we can discuss from there.
And that's an important thing you just said there, Christie, is if there's individuals in our community that would be good board candidates from your perspective, reach out to them, encourage them. So the other part in there is the questions. There's a sample list of questions that was used last time. Those are up for your use or modification. So again, that would be part of what would take place on May 2nd. Finalizing the questions.
We have those also, both of those documents, even though I know they're in the board packet, but since we're creating a Google Drive or a Google folder for
Put it all in there.
these, put it all in there, just so that we can all take a look at that in advance of that meeting.
Certainly. And Diana, you got that? Okay. So then we'll get that started, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody back on May 2nd. Woo-hoo. The next item then, if there are other questions regards to filling the vacancy?
just as a reminder, just for everyone's education, this is a one-year position that would be posted because it would be just to fill the remainder of the vacancy's term, which would be up for election next spring, along with my seat and Kevin Holly's seat. So it would be a one-year term essentially, and then there would still be 3 up for election next year as originally planned.
Good point. Okay. Next item that I had for the board, I'm asking the board to approve an intergovernmental agreement with District 120 so that the 2 districts will share their student data. The purpose of this agreement is twofold. A is for District 75 to be able to share more, have the ability to be able to share more freely student data with how the future 120 students are doing as they're progressing towards high school. The flip side is, it also then, Mundelein High School will be agreeing to it, also being able to share back down to District 75, how the students are progressing once they've entered high school. The ideal goal of all of this is for both school districts to be able to be more proactive in their approach for how we're able to identify things that are working really well for our students and our staff, and for us to identify the areas that we can address to help shore up where we might see some areas of need. So by having this in place, it gives us the opportunity to start sharing that data, which I don't know why we haven't been doing this since both school districts were established, but we would like to do that now. And we're going to expand it. So I have asked from a District 120 perspective that the agreements go with all of the pre-K 8 school districts that feed into 120. And all of them have been agreeable to that. So the sharing agreement would just be between the high school and that individual elementary district. But I think in the long run, it's going to benefit the entire Mundelein community. So it does keep all the privacies in place for our students. It's not to be shared with third-party vendors. It is strictly school district to school district. There are safety protocols in there that should there be a data breach at any district, that school district does need to notify the other school district. I believe it's within 3 or 5 days, something like that. We've got to get notice out so that it is protected, or at least then we do make people aware. So that is all in place. This would be for a 4-year agreement, so it wouldn't be something we would have annually renewed. There is the option though for a school district, if for whatever reason wanted to terminate the agreement, they could do that at any time, providing a 30-day notice. Questions on the data usage agreement?
Yep. We've had some limited data sharing in the past, that I know some of it has been presented at board meeting, for example, like the Big Ten math, like to see how they had all those students had performed in their high school geometry class. Was that just on a limited basis, and this would allow a more broad?
Yeah,
spectrum?
so the best way to describe that, Christy, that would have been 75 asking 120, can you give me the total number that are doing well?
So with
in
that
math?
means identified.
Right.
Okay.
Whereas now the difference would be, we would be 120 would be able to hand over, here's the 100 students that are going into advanced math and where they excelled. And here's some of the areas that they could have been, we can strengthen them. And here's another group of kids that didn't go into Excel classes and how they're performing, give them the actual student information. So that there's a lot more data to take from that.
And given that we're doing more data collection and data utilization, as we've heard in this past year, this would certainly be helpful along that end. I like hearing that it's not just between 75 and 120, but that the high school is also being proactive in looking at some other schools, because like you said, then that allows all of the community, even with our 4 districts or whatever, to work, together.
I think it's a good way of tracking back and forth. The arrows are going like that.
But wouldn't this as well be consistent with what we've been talking about with monitoring? So we're getting feedback and saying, you know, you need to adjust over here, you need to look over here, all of what going on with back to 6th grade.
Well, they can go back, ideally at least 6, yes.
Yeah.
But we could that would certainly align with everything that we're trying to do.
I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Next two are easier ones. So in your administrative report, this is an annual. The board does need to approve their meeting dates for the upcoming year. I know in the summary, it accidentally put the 6:30 timeframe, but in the actual recommended motion, it does list the meeting start time as 7 PM, our normal start time. This is the time where the board has the option, if you wanted to modify your meeting dates, times, you can do that. Anna's went ahead like she's done in the past, and she's kept it consistent with what you've done as far as meeting times. So the meetings are typically that 3rd or 4th Tuesday of the month, depending on how they fluctuate, and keeping them at 7 o'clock start time. But if you'd like to modify that at all, this is the time for you to be able to have that conversation. If not, we would ask the board to please approve the board meeting schedule as proposed. Good.
Good.
It's got another annual, and this is my actual last report. So I know we just had snow the other day, and I hope there's nothing else, but I think we're in the clear. And every year, public schools need to have the board approve the final calendar, and the final calendar essentially means we've removed all the emergency weather days to actually get the days of attendance. So in that calendar that's before you, those are the days of attendance for this year. We're asking the board to approve that, and that demonstrates that we've met at least the minimum amount of attendance days per Illinois school code. This does then go to the Regional Office of Education for approval, then to the State Board of Education. It goes to that process because this is one of the accountability measures the state uses to make sure we're having our students in the building, and that allows them with releasing our evidence-based funding money that pays us from the state. So we would ask that you do approve the final 21-22 school calendar as presented, with the last day of the school year being May 24th. If by chance something happened where we needed to close a day, it would be brought back to you and we would change it. That would be it for the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Now we are going to move on to the committee updates. And the first committee for this evening to be looked at is the board policy committee. And as we all know, we started this process last month of doing an annual deep dive into our policies as our board policies, and we've sectioned it out. So this month, we're on our second section to be reviewed at this meeting. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to take a look at it. This particular section identifies all the policies 2-130 to 2-230, all of them having to do with the Board of Education, the board meeting themselves, relationships and meetings. I know that we did send out, and we will now be utilizing more closely going forward, the Google Doc that allows everyone to put their comments into the shared doc in advance of these meetings to be a little bit more efficient. So we will be sending that out earlier next time, now that we've got it put into place. So hopefully everyone had a chance to kind of skim through this month. I can go through a couple of my comments that I noted. I make mine first in writing and then I put them up on the Google Doc, but wanted to go through and just discussing. One thing that I noticed was that okay, I didn't have any comments on 130. That looked fine, and we had last adopted it and updated it slightly in September anyway. So for 2-140, I noticed that this contemplates that, first that all of the board email addresses are on the district's website, which it is, and they are. And then it says, second, during regular boards meetings, the report of the board's consideration, all questions or communications submitted through the active electronic link, along with the status of the district response. To me, that seems to imply that we have one email address for the board, which I know some districts do that, where they just have a board email address, not individual board members having an email address. I don't know that this fits exactly with the practice that we're doing. And just wanted to bring that up to see if anyone had any particular comments on it. I like that we have individual board member emails, and because otherwise I'm not sure if we'd all see them or how that would exactly work. And but I guess that, that's something to consider. And and we're not looking to make any changes to it today. These are just discussion points for us to look at down the road. I know some other districts have on their website basically a single, if you have a comment, you put it in there, and then it probably on the back end gets sent to all of the board members or something to that effect. So that's an idea that's, put out there, which then this second subpart would make sense if anything that comes through, if the district looked at it, responded to it, then at the next board meeting, the superintendent would report to us what the district did with that. This just doesn't seem to quite fit. So I just didn't know if anyone had any comments on it.
I kind of like that we have our own individual, because sometimes there's people that don't necessarily want to interact with everyone on the board, and they have individuals where, it's still up to us then to, go through the superintendent or whatever to share that and see whether it should be passed on to the rest of the board. I think if you have just one centralized place, you might run the risk of somebody on board not necessarily seeing it or picking up on it. So.
Well, and I don't think anyone's contemplating removing the joint addresses, but this seems to imply that we shall have, ensure that the district superintendent or the designee shall ensure that the homepage has all of the board's addresses, and that, because it says above in the paragraph above, that they may use the electronic link to the board's email addresses posted on the website. And then it seems to say to the superintendent would then report to the board any questions and communications that came through that electronic link that we don't seem to have. So that's why I'm saying it's talking about a centralized link we don't have. So maybe we either need to put an electronic link on there to have this, or maybe amend this. And I don't know that we need that. That's the question, kind of to be mulled around, but.
Well, there's a lot of emails that go to all the board members.
But that requires people to type in all 7 board members to their email to send them out. Where if there was a centralized one, it would just kind of like email the board and it would, collectively go out. I don't know, but even in that, I don't quite understand this, because even in that instance, if there was a centralized email that would automatically go to all 7 of us without them typing it all in, that still wouldn't require a report from the superintendent back to us to tell us what questions and concerns came into that electronic link, and then to tell us how the district responded. I don't know that this whole second subpart, I don't know that it fits. And I would be curious in feedback from the superintendent if you felt like this was something you needed or wanted, or you don't have to respond now, but maybe think about that and I guess weigh in. But it just doesn't seem to quite make sense. It seems to be sort of one of those forms that maybe is not totally applicable to our district, but maybe we just need to modify the next go around. So I made a note of that on the Google Doc for discussion as we go through. I didn't have any particular other comments other than just to highlight. I don't think any changes are necessary, just highlight. It's always a good reminder, since part of this process is just to educate all of us on the policies as well. It's a good reminder that when email communications, we are allowed as a board to send out email communications to pushing out information to all 7 of us. And I try to, on those emails, say do not reply to all, just as a reminder, even though we should all know that. But this policy highlights that. It's just reminding us that we have an obligation not to reply to all, and because that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act, since we would be discussing an item and essentially having a private meeting via email rather than in person. So, but it does have the list of the permissible electronic communications. You can make agenda item suggestions, reminders about meeting dates, times, and places, board meeting agendas, or information concerning agenda items. Although that's sort of an interesting, weird, because that almost seems to imply like if there's something on the agenda, we can talk about it, but you can't. So that's kind of confusing, but individual emails to community members, which, you know, obviously we're allowed to use our direct, but subject to the other limitations in the policy, you still have to comply by not speaking on behalf of the board in any communication if you respond to a community member doing that. So I just thought that was a good reminder just to point out. The committees, I noticed, and I know we talked a little bit about this at our first go around on this before we had a better procedure on how to do this. The Parent Teacher Advisory Committee, this whole section talks about standing board committees. Clearly, as we look at our agenda, we have committee updates from policy, finance, school boarding. You know, and then we give representative updates from some of the other parts, but I've never, in the 3 years I've been here, I've never seen a Parent Teacher Advisory Committee or Behavioral Interventions Committee, which this policy says could be comprised of the people on the Parent Teacher Advisory Committee. So, and I'm not saying that there's a need for it, but I'm wondering if there's a need to have it as a standing committee as opposed to this being one that we would activate should there be an issue that arose that, you know, warranted us convening this particular committee. But I don't.
Putting it in the category of a
Standing
special.
committee doesn't
Like a
seem to
special
fit
board committee.
in what we're doing. Because this seems to apply only when we need to develop behavioral policy and procedures, which are elsewhere in the policies that are already existing. And since the, you know, further on down, I mean, it says nothing in this policy limits the authority of the superintendent, you know, to have to have their own committees to report to him or her or staff members. And it says special committees can be created for a specific purpose. It just seems to me that this number 2 and 3 seems to be more of a special committee that maybe at one point in time was appointed for a purpose, but by this very policy, it says the special committee is automatically dissolved after presenting its final report to the board or at the board's discretion. I'm just wondering if it's time to dissolve this, or if there's I'd be curious for input from the staff, if that's something we need or need to keep.
That we used to be.
I don't, yeah, I mean, certainly not in the last 3 years, but that's not a long time. So it's just something for consideration. So I noted that in the Google Doc as well, so that when that comes up, we can, for the next press policy, when we're making changes, we can discuss that. To that end, I also wanted to ask if since we have added the school boarding committee to our agenda, I'm wondering if that's something, and since, you know, we intend to do that on an annual basis to talk about various, you know, the things, whether we felt the need to do that, or is that more of a procedural thing that we don't think that we need to? I'm not inclined one way or the other. I just wanted to bring that to the attention since we do have the board policy committee on here, which is also a standing committee, which makes sense. Same thing with the shared services committee. I don't know that that one is actively meeting any longer because it's been implemented for a while now. Is it time to perhaps, you know, put that aside as a special committee that's done, that can be reconvened as issues arise, certainly, but I know the board members that are technically appointed to that, I don't think they've had to meet. I don't think there's been an occasion to.
No, it seems like anything that comes up with shared services is discussed.
On the agenda item, yeah.
Yeah, right.
And when they were creating the whole arrangement. Obviously, it made sense to have a committee to do that, and I know the high school had one as well. I'm just questioning, and maybe I'm wrong, I wasn't a part of that, so I don't know if, if there's a reason to keep that in the policies as we're adjusting to make these keep up to date with our practices.
Well, this might be something that we need to have a discussion on. And look at, especially with the dialogue and according back to what you said about school board. Well, there may be, I mean, we were talking about interactions with the community. Maybe there needs to be a committee that works on these interactions with the community. And if we're looking in July, talking about strategic planning, maybe we need a strategic planning committee. And
I think that, and maybe this is a discussion to start now, but then continue
right,
at that particular time, because I think hopefully we'd have the entire board present, and then that would be a better time to do that, but and in the meantime, and that's a good point too, that maybe should be added to the Google Docs so that we don't forget to come back to that, but I think that might be time to, adjust and move from some of these other ones that I imagine, because they're in the policy, must have been issues for the district at one point that caused us to
agreed.
create them, but I just wonder if it's time to update that, like you said, so.
Yeah, I think we probably should.
Chime in, Freddie, if you've got anything, but no need, I just don't want to forget you.
Oh, I gotcha. Thank you.
I didn't have any other particular comments or things to bring up until 2/2/20, because 160 is on the board attorney. Procurement of architectural, engineering, and land surveying services. Types of board education meetings. I guess that's a good one just to sort of educate through. We have general board meetings.
Right.
Regular meetings, closed meetings, which, are in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, and that's all laid out in there, which we recited at the beginning of each time when we go into closed session. One thing I found interesting, although I think it's good practice to still do it each time anyway, but when it says you can have a series of closed meetings if it's on a single topic, as long as they're held within 3 months, if they're going to be scheduled to be held within 3 months of the vote, you technically only need one motion calling for a series of closed meetings. I suppose an example that we've already identified, maybe we won't need, but let's say we get 20 applications and we need to have 20 interviews. I imagine we could make a motion to have a series of closed meetings without having to reconvene, go into closed session and do that. However, I think it's still good practice because it's not that hard. If we're already gonna be here doing it, open the session, get that out of the way, then go into closed session. That way there's a clear note and minutes to follow that. So while that's an interesting prospect, I think it makes sense to do it each time. We all know that no action is taken in the closed meeting. We have to go back out to open session to vote. This talks about if we did a reconvened or a rescheduled meeting after public notice, what the options are. And then special meetings. Special meetings can be called by the president or by any 3 members of the board. So that's an interesting thing to think of. As long as you have 3 of present, you have to do that. It doesn't have to be a quorum, which we've done for committee meetings. And we've been doing that with some of our things that have been happening. So. More educational. We all have experienced 210 when we see the board members, and we'll get a chance to do that apparently at May 17th meeting, hopefully. Although we won't need to, that the organizational meeting takes place usually in May. And that one I know was so probably be updated in the next press go around, I would guess, because I believe they just passed that to allow a little bit of a longer period. It used to be within 28 days. I think that's longer. So this language will probably change by statute in the next press go around, but for us, because I noticed this was last amended March 2020, so that was not the last amendment, but it probably will be. So let's see, what was my comments? 220. Obviously, we have an agenda that's posted before each meeting, and that goes through, what items for the public's notice, what will be on the agenda and discussed, and there. Now, items that are not on the agenda can be discussed, whether among board members or whomever, but we can't vote on them, and we'd have to bring those and put those on an agenda at a future meeting in order to have a vote or take action on them. I also thought it was noteworthy to see that the policy specifically says that district residents can suggest items for future agendas. It doesn't say that we're obligated to put them on an agenda, but they can suggest that. So I thought that was a good point to mention and bring out. And as I noted in the Google Doc, if anyone looked at it, I learned something by reading this, that in my 3 years, the president has always recorded the meetings with this little device. According to our policy, it's supposed to be the superintendent or the secretary. Who knew? But I don't care, and it doesn't matter to me either way. I don't think we need to update anything. I just thought that was interesting that you learned something new when you read the policies. I also thought it was, because this is our, I guess for reference, this is our verbatim recording of closed meetings that's set forth in the policy is done by that. But as we, this policy was updated in the last January of 2022 when we did the last press policy. That's because there were some changes that were made in accordance with allowing for board members to participate but still establish a quorum, even if they're not present in the room. And not only in times of emergency and under that. So that had already been updated in here. And I know that not all districts are still doing Zoom meetings, but some are, and we've elected at least through this year, and that's something to be discussed later. But I thought it was interesting to note that there are provisions in this policy that do address recording of board meetings and what's permitted. And personally, I think that knowing that it's possible for anybody to come in according to the policy and record a meeting, as long as we give them a space to do it, I would almost prefer to have the Zoom meetings continue rather than having somebody come in on their own and do that, because then you can't dictate who the audience is or who's getting to see that, where this allows board members or community members who have a particular comment or question or interest to participate. And I think that it's helpful, but not on today's agenda. I didn't have any other comments. Did anyone else have anything of note that they wanted to bring out? Yes. See, we're gonna get quicker each time we do these, so these don't take so long in our meetings. That's the goal.
Well, I think this process also helps if you're gonna make changes down the line, you've at least taken a look at it.
Right.
And then it doesn't require reading like the entire
Right.
booklet, and if you didn't get to it, then you're still hopefully up on it if you're paying attention. Okay, so moving on to the next committee, we have the Finance Advisory Committee, which we heard a little bit about. Ready?
Yeah, I think Ray hit it right before T did her presentation. I mean, our last meeting was obviously a special finance meeting to go over the draft budget. So not to be repetitive, but I thought T did a phenomenal job of, and Diana in that meeting, just kind of guiding us through it line item by line item. It was very tedious, but it was also my first time I've done that since being on the board. So it was very beneficial and informative. We actually have our next meeting shortly, May 10th, right amongst all of these meetings and interviews with the new board members. So that's our update. Ray, if there's anything you want to add, but again, I thought you hit it on the head earlier with before T's presentation.
Yeah, I thought, here's one of the other things that we went over was the policies. I thought maybe you would hit on that. Policy review we did.
Yeah, I didn't know, and I didn't touch base with Christy last week when we had our equity meeting, but yeah, I don't know what was the plan for that, I guess, because we did review the first set of policies too, Christy. Were we just gonna wait until we got to that, or was that just kind of?
I don't mind if you want to share, if there was something you feel like we need to know in context of the draft budget, issue that might happen. I don't have my list with me, but I want to say that comes up in section 4. So if that would take if there's anything you want to highlight, I have no problem with you doing that before we get there. Otherwise, when we get to that point, I'll turn it over to you and let you go through it, since the finance committee will have taken a deep dive into those policies.
Yeah, I didn't prepare anything, to be quite honest. I mean, I have my notes, but I didn't prepare anything formal to really go over it. There wasn't anything in particular to the draft policy that we need to address in these or the draft budget that we have to address in these policies. Ray, if you have anything you want to highlight, by all means, go ahead. But yeah, I didn't put anything together. I thought we were going to review it more when we got to section 4, so that we can share it with the entire board.
And now that we have the Google Doc, in your spare time, before we get to that section, you could always, because there's tabs on the bottom that go to each section, you could always go ahead and turn your written notes. Like I said, I do written notes and then I turn it in. So if you wanted to populate that with some of your comments, that would help us when we get to that point. That way you don't have to prepare something extra. You could just populate that and then discuss it as you go.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. Plus, while it's still fresh in my head too from a couple weeks ago, so for sure.
So go for it. Okay, well then moving on, we've got our school boarding committee. And this, I know because we went so long last time, we didn't quite get to this part. Maybe we had Eric we talked about a few different things, but I know that we talked about going through the code of conduct, and I know that was in our board packet, which is also exhibit 280E of the policies, but I do have, a copy before us, I guess. We'll all get to hear it at the next board meeting as well, when we have a new board member take this oath. I guess maybe it bears noting that the first affirmation, swearing or affirm in this is shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets, which is a good segue into the draft policy, draft budget that was presented this evening. I don't know if we wanted to, I think the plan was to go over one of these per meeting, and
Yeah. And I was actually, and Eric's not here, but that was kind of his idea and suggestion. And if people are coming up with ideas, we let them rule,
and I totally would have.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to
But
keep
I
up
was
with.
just gonna say,
Sure.
because we were gonna do one, and then in that book, The Art of School Boarding, there's a whole chapter where they dissect each one of these and kind of go. So that might be how we do it,
Okay.
each board meeting, take one item and kind of
Go through the
give
discussion.
a discussion and dissect the meaning of it.
Okay. We will share that with Eric, and
Yeah.
hopefully he'll want to take on that role then the next time.
Right.
But I like that first one being short and sweet. I think that works too. So with the segue that was going on with our other meetings. And then moving on, if there's nothing else on that issue, does anyone have any other comments on the school boarding for this meeting? Okay, moving on to our representative updates. The first one is the STEAM Foundation, and I am the representative for that. So they are continuing to have meetings, and as we said last time, that the Science Explorers program is in full swing, and the students, I know a few who are working on their projects, and they're excited about it. So I'm excited to see the outcome of their projects, which they're going to have posters, and those that complete them and choose to do that, they're gonna be displayed out in the district lobby here before the next board meeting. So I would invite, and all of you who will be next time to attend early for the board meeting so that you can take a look at those and meet with the students who decide to come to the meeting to kind of present on them out in the lobby and, can answer questions. So that should be exciting, since I know a lot of these kids are very excited about getting to do that. At the STEAM Foundation, there's also been brainstorming some new ideas for fundraising, since, fundraising with all of this has sort of been difficult the last couple of years and, have been limited, but, they've been able to do some and still been able to fund some good areas for the district. I know that the graphic went out and the posters went out and on social media and around that they're doing a summer band camp now for the 4th going into 5th grade students, and the STEAM Foundation was able to fund that grant for this first year to get that started, and then hopefully, take it on by the district thereafter. But for this first summer to make it happen, trying to get the kids, band program suffered, in the pandemic with a lot of kids, not participating in band, and they didn't have one whole year of band. So they're trying to foster ways to get them up and running so they can hit the ground running with their new instruments that they've just picked up in the spring. So that is exciting. And I know that the STEAM Foundation president was going to reach out to the district to see if they can coordinate with the district and the PTO and the principals when they do their calendaring for the next school year, so that we can make sure that we don't overlap with fundraisers and stuff that are trying to happen and go on. So hopefully that will be able to take place. And I know that Eric is our CEDAW rep and he is not here this evening, so we'll let him report on that at the next meeting. Community Outreach Village Liaison.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Then we have the Equity Committee. So we were going to have Eric kind of take the lead on that one a little bit too, but we had our working meeting, Freddie, Eric, and I, with the community members last week. Or I think it was last week. We had to move it from the 11th to the 12th because it conflicted with another meeting that was at the district office. And we did have 3 of our committee members also attend with us, and it did allow us to, I think it was a very productive meeting. I think we had a lot of really good feedback, and Eric has been able to take the notes and the topics that we talked about and translating it to our working draft. I don't know about Freddie. I have not had a chance since he sent that to us over the weekend to get back to it, but I intend to compare with my notes and see if it's in the working form that we're all comfortable, the 3 of us are comfortable with. When we get to that point, we will be sending it out for a last round of comments by email to the community committee members, so they can give any other details that we would take into consideration. And our goal is to also send it out in its draft form to the board members for you to take a look at it, so that again, you're not looking at it for the first time at the next board meeting. We would be asking to put it on the agenda for next, to bring that final proposed policy to the board to vote on at the next board meeting. And that will close out the equity committee, which is, was a special committee committed or convened for the purpose of writing this policy. And assuming that the board approves it, we don't anticipate needing other meetings between now and the next meeting. And that would conclude that committee. Did I miss anything, Freddie?
No, the only thing, I did get to read Eric's draft. I didn't have my notes with me at the time, so it looks really good. But I do want to compare it to my notes just to make sure, again, multiple set of eyes, and we all took probably different notes. So, and then, yeah, just to echo what you said, I thought it was a very, very, very beneficial meeting, just with the different points of view. And, we had one working meeting prior to that, and I thought that was a really good meeting as well. But having community members and just having those 3 extra set of eyes on the draft policy. I thought it was very, very good for us, and I look forward to presenting it to the board.
Yeah, and I think it was helpful because we had a community member, a staff member, and an administrator who all happened to be there, and having their perspective and insight on it was really helpful, as opposed to just the board member sitting down and doing it. So I thought it was a really good, productive meeting. They had a lot of feedback and wordsmithing that was helpful, for us to do that. And I'm happy where we have come with it, and we're getting it in that wrapped up form, and then we will be submitting it to you in draft form by email sometime between now and the next packet going out. And then we will be asking, hoping to present that for approval at the next board meeting. Okay. Moving on, we have next on our agenda is the consent agenda. Does any board member have any items that they want removed from the consent agenda for discussion? Hearing none. Okay, so moving on then to the,
Just, I think we have to move to accept the consent agenda.
right. I will make.
I move we accept the consent agenda.
Okay, I will second that. Secretary, please call the roll. Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Ditzky, yes. Fingerhut,
Aye.
Legos,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Holly absent, the letter absent.
Thank you, and that is approved. So now moving on to the board action items for the evening. I will start and make a motion that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve fiscal year 2022, 2023 draft tentative budget as presented.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Fingerhut,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
the letter absent. Legos,
Aye.
Ditzky, aye. Holly, yeah.
And then moving on, I will make a motion that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the job descriptions, dual language middle school teacher, language arts, dual language middle school teacher, general social studies, dual language middle school teacher, language arts and social studies, teacher middle school bilingual reading interventionist, teacher elementary bilingual reading interventionist, summer school leader, and summer school site supervisor as presented.
Second.
Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Fingerhut.
Aye.
Ditzky, aye. Legos,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Holly, absent.
I will now make a motion that the Board of Education of Mundelein School District 75 approve the resignation of school board member Lisa St. Clair effective April 19th, 2022.
Second.
Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Fingerhut,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Legos,
Aye.
Ditzky, aye. Holly, absent. The letter absent.
Now I will move that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the data intergovernmental agreement with Mundelein High School District 120 for a 4-year agreement that expires on June 30th, 2026.
Second.
Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Fingerhut,
Aye.
Ditzky, aye. Legos,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Holly absent, Quillister absent.
I will now make a motion that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 adopt the establishment of regular meetings of the Board of Education to be held at 470 North Lake Street, Mundelein, Illinois, at 7 PM as presented.
Second.
Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Figurehead.
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Ditzky, aye. Legos,
Aye.
Quillister absent, Holly absent.
Finally, I will make a motion that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the final 2021-2022 school calendar as presented.
Second.
Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Figurehead,
Aye.
Ditzky, aye. Rose,
Aye.
Legos,
Aye.
Quillister absent, Holly absent.
Will now move that the Board of Education meeting will now, or, okay, sorry. The Board of Education meeting will now adjourn and enter into executive session at 8:57 PM. The secretary, for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel of the public for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee
Second.
or against, hold on, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity, for the discussion of collective negotiation matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, and for the discussion of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for purpose of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.06.5 of the statute.
Second.
Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Figurehead.
Aye.
Ditzky, aye. Quillister absent, Gallegos,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Holly absent.
Calling the meeting back into open session at 9:33 PM. Roll call at this point.
Yep.
Okay. Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Chair absent, Fingerhut,
Aye, here.
Gallegos,
Here.
Ditzky, here, Rose,
Here.
Holly absent.
I will make a motion that we approve the March 15th, 2022 executive session minutes as presented.
Second.
Secretary Pro Tem, please call the roll.
Fingerhut,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Chair absent, Gallegos,
Aye.
Ditzky, aye, Holly absent.
So at this point, we have the president's prerogative. It's President Pro Tem's prerogative today, opportunity to address the board. I don't have anything particularly to discuss. Does anyone have any items they want to put on any future agendas or raise at this time?
I look forward to doing the interviewing.
I look forward to wrapping up those other committees and I guess the next few weeks, filling it with these, but that's okay. It's an effective use of time. And, getting everything hopefully wrapped up before the end of the school year so that we're in a good position to go into the summer and the activities we have planned for that, and then be good to go for the next school year.
Christy, you did a good job today. Thank you for filling in.
No problem. Thank you for bearing with me.
I haven't screwed up the sheet.
Anna keeps one too, so it's good. And I will find out from Kevin Hawley how he sends out exit slips and whether or not I will be sending those out or he will be, but they will come out one way or the other. So we're asking you to fill those out. If there is no further business to come before the board, the meeting stands adjourned at 9:35 PM. I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I think we can do all in favor, right?
You should do the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Stands adjourned.